Have you ever been like totally confused by someone's take on things? Like you're both looking at the same thing, but their reaction is just, you just can't wrap your head around it.
Oh, yeah, totally.
That's kind of the head scratcher we're tackling in this deep dive. How we even begin to understand how other people think. And we're diving deep with some really cool stuff you sent our way, specifically from Yang Dahui, or Roxas Yang, and his book, Young Gay, which translates to deeper thinking.
Right on.
So,
Yang Dahi, this guy's fascinating. Writer, speaker. He's got the blog 4thimk.net, and he's actually a professional trader too. But he's spent like 6 years just immersed in the world of thinking, analyzed over 100 books on it.
wow.
Yeah, and he's got a huge following online. He's written bestsellers like Yin Yeah, that's the technology of deep learning, and Ro, meaning the evolution of thinking.
Yeah.
So yeah, safe to say he's put in the work to figure out how our minds tick.
So for you, dear listener, our mission today is to pull out the good stuff, the practical, actionable wisdom from all this. Basically a fast track to understanding different perspectives, Think of it like boosting your mental agility to navigate the sometimes totally wild world of how other people think.
For sure.
We'll be exploring different ways our minds work, those different modes of thinking, and how those shape our own reality, but also like the realities of everyone around us.
Yeah, and how we can better relate to them because of that.
Exactly.
I think it's important to jump into Yang's idea of correct posture for thinking.
Ooh.
You know how he makes this great analogy with running?
Okay.
Just because someone can run doesn't mean they're like a skilled runner.
Yeah, totally. There's a huge difference between someone who jogs a bit and like an Olympic sprinter.
Exactly. So Yang says having the wrong thinking posture is basically like having terrible running form. You could be putting in a ton of mental effort, be super smart, but you end up wasting energy and only getting so-so results.
It's like you're running with weights on your ankles.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to get very far very fast.
Right.
But if you build up the right thinking posture, like a runner with perfect technique.
Smooth.
Exactly. You become more efficient, effective, way less likely to trip up mentally. Problems that seemed impossible all of a sudden have solutions. Those big goals start to feel within reach. Yang's whole thing is about teaching us this correct posture and giving us the tools to train our thinking.
I love that.
Yeah.
So to get into that right posture, he breaks down this concept of skilled thinking into 5 core abilities.
Yeah.
He says people who are known as truly sharp thinkers, whatever their field is, they usually have at least 4, if not all 5 of these abilities.
And the cool thing is they're all linked. It's like, facets of a well-cut gem. Improve one, the others shine brighter. He says working on any one of these 5 will boost the others. Kind of how when you work on your fitness, your overall health gets better.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are these 5 superpowers?
Superpowers, I like that.
Yeah. The first one is independent thinking. And the Chinese description, Tiro Tiosa, it really gets to the heart of it. It's breaking free from existing frameworks, starting to think for yourself. That breaking free part is key.
Absolutely. It's not just thinking differently, it's thinking for yourself.
Exactly. Then there's logical thinking.
Yeah.
Making your ideas convincing, but also being able to really get to the bottom of problems, building a solid argument.
Right.
Now, this third one's super relevant for us today. Perspective-taking thinking. That's SEER. It's like having 3 tools: performance, analysis, knowledge, all to build your reasoning skills by seeing things from others' points of view. We'll definitely come back to this one.
For sure. That's a big one.
It is.
The fourth one is creative thinking. That's the ability to connect what you know with new insights. It's what leads to those aha moments, forging new mental pathways, seeing connections where others don't.
Love it.
And lastly, reflective thinking in Ruwa. It's the ability to refine how you think, constantly improving your mental pathways. It's like a continuous upgrade for your brain.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got our 5 core abilities. Now, to really understand how they work, especially that independent thinking thing, we've got to look at this super influential theory in psychology, dual process reasoning. It comes from Keith E. Stanovich and, of course, the famous Daniel Kahneman in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
It is.
So basically, this theory says our minds have 2 systems of thinking. System 1 is what we call intuitive thinking, those super quick, automatic first reactions to things. It's what happens when you see something familiar. And the key here for understanding others is that those first reactions, their system 1, it's rooted in their past, even the parts they're not aware of.
Right.
Like, think about 1 + 1 in Bliss. Most of us, the answer 2 just pops up, no effort. It's System 1, fast, automatic, based on instinct and experience.
Now, contrast that with System 2, deliberate thinking, the slower, more conscious kind of thinking, the one you use when you need to really focus.
Yeah, like if you have to solve 14 by 86 equals fun, there's no instant answer there. You need to concentrate, maybe even grab a calculator. That's System 2 at work.
Yang uses a really cool visual example in his book, a picture of these stacked blocks.
Oh, I think I remember that one.
Yeah. At first glance, System 1 might tell you the stacks on the left and right look about the same height, and maybe their tops look darker, like they're connected somehow. That's System 1 trying to find patterns and meaning.
Trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
But then, if you're told the number of blocks on the left is actually the same as the middle stack, you probably get a little unsure. And that's when System 2 kicks in. You start counting the blocks, carefully to check. System 2 is like the fact checker, double-checking those quick conclusions from System 1.
So it's slower, but more accurate.
And Yang says we rely on System 1 constantly in everyday life, like reading facial expressions.
Yeah.
We don't overthink every little muscle twitch to figure out someone's mood. System 1 just tells us, okay, this person looks unhappy.
Yeah.
But that's pretty broad, right? Unhappy could mean so many things. Angry, disappointed, frustrated. When Yang asks this in his workshops, he gets all sorts of answers. But the point is, whatever you answer, it came from intuition, that quick System 1.
It's fascinating how much our brain does without us even realizing it. It makes you wonder, how many of our judgments about people are based on these unconscious signals?
Yeah, for sure. So where does System 1 get these instant conclusions from? Yang says it's mostly from experience. What we've learned in experience shapes our gut feelings, like why 1 + 1 is so automatic. We've solved that a million times.
It's a good shortcut.
Exactly.
Right.
Think about your morning routine. Getting ready, your commute, maybe a quick chat with a coworker. You're mostly on autopilot, right?
Right.
System 1, you're not analyzing each step. It's efficient. Frees up your brain for tougher stuff.
Yeah, you'd never get anything done if you had to think about every little detail.
Exactly. But what about when things get really challenging? Do we switch to System 2 then? Not always, according to Yang. He says if you've got loads of experience in something, you might still be using mostly System 1, like a pro basketball player. Dribbling, passing, shooting, it becomes second nature. They're not thinking about every move.
I can see that.
Yang actually tells this amazing story about firefighters going into a burning kitchen. They put out the flames, but then the captain suddenly yells, "Get out now!" He didn't know why at that moment, but a second later, the floor collapses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Later, he realized the fire was unusually quiet, new roaring sounds, and he'd felt a weird heat on his ears.
Oh, interesting.
His System 1 picked up on those little clues, gave him a gut feeling that something was wrong, even though he couldn't explain it right then. Turns out the fire was in the basement, making the floor super unstable. So experienced intuition can save lives.
It's like that sixth sense you hear about, right?
Totally, yeah.
That gut feeling that something's off. Yang says it's not magic, it's just tons of experience being processed by System 1. That fire captain, because he was so experienced, he noticed those tiny details that others wouldn't have.
So it wasn't a conscious decision, it was like his subconscious was screaming at him.
Exactly. It's amazing.
So his intuition, this System 1 response, only from experience? Not quite. Yang says some of it is hardwired, like our instincts. There's this optical illusion. With black circles, most people see the circle on the left as bigger even though they're the same size. That's System 1 messing with our perception, a built-in bias.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've seen those. They're so trippy.
They are. And this leads to a really cool point. Yang suggests that sometimes what we think are our own thoughts, our beliefs, might not actually be ours in the way we think.
That's a bit mind-blowing. Where do they come from then?
Right.
Yeah.
And this is where those societal influences come in, shaping our System 1 without us even realizing it. Take the whole pink and blue for babies thing. We instantly think pink for girls, blue for boys. Seems basic, right?
Yeah, it's ingrained in us.
Totally. But Yang says it wasn't always like this. Before around 1918, and even up to 1940, it was the other way around. Pink was seen as more bold, so for boys, and blue was delicate, so for girls. So many of our obvious beliefs might just be cultural conditioning.
It makes you question everything. What else that I think is just common sense is actually just what I've been taught to believe.
Exactly. Yang says because System 1's always active, these ingrained, sometimes wrong beliefs become our default lens. Here's an example. Someone has a bad experience leading a club, and they decide, I'm just not a leader. And that becomes their System 1 reaction, so they avoid leadership without even remembering why. It feels like truth, just like pink blue feels right now.
Yeah, we don't even stop to question it.
And that leads right into Yang's definition of bias, unexamined intuition. Basically, a System 1 response that hasn't been checked by System 2. He gives this simple example. Curious Xiaoming looked out the window and saw a colorful bird. Xiaoming felt very relaxed. Did you picture Xiaoming as a boy?
I think I did.
Most people do, even though it doesn't say anything about Xiaoming's gender. Our System 1 jumps to that conclusion because we associate Xiaoming with boys. It's a shortcut, but if we use System 2, we realize we actually know very little about Xiaoming.
It's amazing how quickly our brains make these assumptions, even without any real information.
Yeah. And Yang, living in Malaysia, he sees stuff like racial bias against Malaysians or prejudice against young workers called the strawberry generation. These are all System 1 biases formed without real understanding. He also talks about self-directed biases like thinking I can't do this, or work biases like thinking a task must be done a certain way even if there's a better way. All these unexamined intuitions, they limit our thinking.
So we need that System 2 to step in.
Exactly.
To question things.
And that's where deliberate thinking System 2 comes in. Its job is to fix those System 1 flaws by consciously analyzing those gut reactions.
Yeah.
Switching to System 2 lets us see our biases, question our assumptions, and reach better conclusions.
It's like taking a step back and really thinking things through.
And this brings us to independent thinking. Yang says System 1 is past-oriented. It thinks inside the box, using those old frameworks. System 2 is future-oriented. It explores new frameworks, thinking outside the box, like the 1 + 1 = riddle, System 1 says 2. But System 2, it can find other answers, like 3 if it's about 2 people having a child, or a pile of sand plus another pile is still one pile, or even the Chinese character for field, if you look at the shapes.
It's seeing things from different angles.
Yes. He tells another story about Xiaoming, who's asked by his rich neighbor to find a plank of wood 2 meters long, 1 meter wide for a Bitcoin. Xiaoming's System 1 immediately thought, nope, I don't have that, and gave up. But the next day, he realized he could have just taken his wooden door off its hinges.
Oh.
System 1 gave a quick but limited answer. System 2, by asking, what in my house is wood and that size, could have led to a Bitcoin. This plays out at work, too. Some people just do their tasks on autopilot, System 1, while others look for better ways, System 2.
The innovators versus the status quo.
Yes. So Yang defines independent thinking not as just reaching conclusions alone, but as that second-level thinking after that first reaction.
It's like questioning your initial thought.
Exactly. Like, is this really the best answer? Are there other possibilities?
Not just accepting the first thing that pops into your head.
Exactly. And he says independent thinking isn't about being contrary just to be different. It's not about always disagreeing or rejecting mainstream ideas. It's about the process, examining your own thoughts and assumptions.
So it's more about self-reflection than rebellion.
Totally. True independent thinking is more about questioning your own intuition than opposing others. Yang says to really examine why you believe something, then try to doubt it. And do the reverse. Try to find reasons to believe something you initially doubted. This helps you see things more clearly.
Like playing devil's advocate with yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
There's this research that backs this up. In his book, Beyond IQ, Stanovich says that just asking people to consider the opposite helps them give more rational answers. It makes them step outside their initial viewpoint. And that's important because of something called confirmation bias. Yang talks about this too. It's our tendency to look for information that supports what we already believe. So even when we use System 2, it can end up just confirming what System 1 already decided instead of actually being objective.
So it's like our brains are trying to trick us into being right all the time.
Yeah, exactly. It takes effort to overcome that.
So Yan gives us 2 main ways to practice independent thinking. First, reflect on that first intuition. Then take the opposite stance. Be your own devil's advocate. Second, acknowledge that first thought, but step away from it and try to think about it from a totally different angle or using a different framework.
So you can either challenge your initial thought directly or just look at it from a different perspective.
Exactly. So why bother with all this independent thinking? Yang gives 2 big reasons. One is self-evolution. He says System 1 keeps us repeating the same thought patterns based on past experiences. Independent thinking lets us break free. It helps us look at our old ideas, see if they're still valid, and move on to better ways of understanding the world.
So it's about personal growth.
Absolutely. It's a constant process.
Yeah.
When you have a new thought, you check it, see if it's flawed, and then you refine it. That refined thought becomes part of your experience, and then it influences your System 1 in the future, and then you do it all over again. This cycle of thinking is how we grow and how our understanding of the world evolves.
It's like we're constantly learning and unlearning.
Right.
That's really cool.
Yang's second reason for independent thinking is about reclaiming autonomy. He asks, if all your thoughts come from outside sources like your family, culture, the media, then aren't your actions and even your destiny being controlled by those things? It's like being a robot following a program. He talks about the stages of developing autonomous thinking. From ages 0 to 12, we're basically sponges, absorbing information without really thinking critically. It makes sense when you're young and don't know much, but it means we accept some ideas that might be wrong or limit us.
We're just taking it all in.
Right.
Then comes adolescence, ages 13 to 24, lots of brain changes, hormones going wild, and we start questioning things, forming our identity, trying to fit in with our peers. We start challenging some of those early beliefs. But even then, it's tough to tell if we're really thinking for ourselves or just echoing what our friends or society believes. It's a time when we're easily influenced, especially by our peers.
Peer pressure is real.
Yeah, for sure.
And then there's this period between 25 and 36, what Yang calls the second adolescence.
Second adolescence, that's interesting.
I know, right?
Why that age range?
He says it's a key time for developing real independent thought. Biologically, our frontal lobes, the part of the brain that controls our higher thinking, are pretty much fully developed by 25. There's research on this, like Somerville's Searching for Signatures of Brain Maturity, showing this. The frontal lobe is super important for all that good thinking, rational thought, planning, abstract ideas, and perspective taking. So by our mid-20s, our brains are basically ready for autonomous thinking.
But just because we're capable doesn't mean we actually do it, right?
Exactly. And this is where it gets interesting. Yang says this period, 25 to 36, becomes a kind of dividing line. Those who actively engage in independent thinking here, they're more likely to develop their own unique thinking styles and stand out. But those who don't, they risk staying stuck, mostly operating on those early, unexamined beliefs. It's like every time we think independently during this time, we're breaking free from that default destiny of being average.
It's like choosing your own path.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that.
And he stresses that independent thinking is the foundation for all those other thinking skills.
Yeah.
Logical thinking, perspective taking, creative thinking, they all build on it.
So it's like the key to unlocking those other skills.
Precisely.
So how do we actually train ourselves to do this?
So Yang gives this really practical exercise. Whenever you realize you're about to make a choice, decision, or judgment, try to stop that first reaction.
Don't just go with your gut.
Right. Then ask yourself two things. What's the complete opposite of what I just thought? And are there other totally different conclusions I haven't thought of?
Wow, I'm going to have to try that. It forces you to think beyond that first instinct.
Yeah.
What if it's hard to stop that initial reaction, though?
He gets that. He says if it's tough to do in the moment, try setting aside just 10 minutes a day to think about the choices and judgments you made that day. It's all about building that habit of reflection.
Like a mental review at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've talked a lot about Yang Dahui's ideas. The two systems of thinking, intuition, biases, and what independent thinking really means. It's been a deep dive.
It has. So to sum it up, we've got System 1, fast and intuitive, and System 2, slower and more deliberate. We saw how intuition, though super useful, is based on our experiences and can be biased, meaning it's just a gut feeling we haven't thought through. And we really dug into independent thinking. It's not just thinking alone, it's thinking after our first reaction. It's questioning, considering different views, and owning our thought processes.
And this is so crucial for understanding how other people think. Their System 1 is shaped by their experiences, their biases are different, and their journey with independent thinking is unique.
And for you, listener, who wants to learn things quickly but deeply, understanding this gives you a powerful framework. It's a lens to analyze information and see why people have different opinions on the same thing.
So here's something to ponder. Think of a belief you have that seems completely obvious, something you never question. What's the exact opposite of that belief? And what experiences or framework could explain that opposite view? Try using your System 2 to explore that.
It's all about stretching those mental muscles.
Exactly.
And this is just the start of our deep thinking journey. We can definitely explore logical thinking, perspective taking, which is all about understanding others, and all the other cool thinking skills that Yang talks about, based on what you're interested in and what you send us. Keep up that awesome work on your thinking upgrade journey.